Good morning and welcome to our very first episode of Wetland Wonders. This is a webinar series with our friends at Old Woman Creek. And today I am going to have Jen talking about why wetlands are wonderful. But before Jen gets started, I just want to quickly go over our series that's coming up this month with the team here, and then pass it off to Janice and Emily so that they can tell you what they do. So like I said, today we're going to be talking about why wetlands are wonderful. Next Thursday at noon, we will be talking about bird migration and how birds use wetlands during their migration. And the following week is citizen science. And lastly, we will be talking about aquatic plant invasive species. So that is what's coming down the pike. I also want to point out the Q&A box. If you have any questions, please utilize the Q&A box, and we will do our best to answer your questions or ask Jen during the presentation to answer for you. So I'm Alyssa Gapel. Thanks for joining us. I'm going to pass it over to Janice now to introduce herself, and then Emily, and then Jen will get started with her presentation.
Hi everyone, I'm Janice Kearns. I'm the Reserve Manager here at Old Woman Creek National Estuary Research Reserve. I oversee both research and education here and make things run smoothly. So, Emily?
Yeah, hi everybody. My name is Emily Kuznick. I am the Coastal Training Program Coordinator at Old Woman Creek. Short explanation is I do adult education, so I mostly work with different professionals that are either directly or indirectly involved with the environment. So stormwater management, marine debris, species monitoring, erosion control, all the coastal issues. So I get to work with a lot of different partners, including government agencies, conservancies, private sector, and the general public. And that's it.
On to you, Jen.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Jennifer Buhite. I'm the Education Coordinator here at Old Woman Creek, and today we're going to be talking about wetlands. So I'm going to start my presentation so you can see it. All right. So here at Old Woman Creek, we are a federal and state partnership. So we were established in 1980. We joined the federal program, the National Estuarine Research Reserve Program. So it is our 40th anniversary this year. None of us have been here quite that long that you're meeting today. But the goal of this program, which is a federal program, is to protect and study estuarine systems. So from this picture, you can see that there are 29 of these national estuarine research reserves throughout the country, always coastal, always at an estuary. There are 2 in the Great Lakes ourselves here at Old Woman Creek on Lake Erie, and then Lake Superior came on about 11 years ago, and they are obviously in the Great Lake of Lake Superior. So they represent the upper Great Lakes, and Old Woman Creek represents the lower Great Lakes. So we're studying the water quality here in our estuary. An estuary is an area where 2 distinct bodies of water meet and mix. So this is an aerial photograph of Old Woman Creek, the mouth of our creek meeting Lake Erie. And you can see that there's a beach there, but the mouth is bisecting the beach and making its way to Lake Erie. So our 2 bodies of water are obviously Lake Erie and Old Woman Creek. Sometimes the creek is running into the lake, and sometimes the lake is pushing back into the creek. And where those waters are meeting and mixing, that's when we get our estuary. Now within our estuary, we have some wetlands. We have a coastal wetland, and a wetland is just an area that can be wet all year, part of the year, or very little part of the year. And the plants and animals that live within the wetland are able to adapt to those fluctuating water levels. So if they get high and dry, they're okay. And if they get inundated, which most of our wetland right now is inundated, they are okay as well. So these coastal wetlands that we have in Ohio are what we're going to be focusing on today. Wetlands have four major ecosystem services, as we call them, so benefits that humans receive from them. One is they act as nature's kidneys, so they are a filtering agent for water that's moving through the system. They also help with floodwaters. Here at Old Woman Creek, our water levels can increase about 20% after a major storm event. And so those areas of the wetland that might be drier sometimes can soak up some of that extra water. Wetlands also provide great habitat for our plants and animals. And they provide awesome opportunities for us humans to recreate. So we're going to go into more detail with each of these things. So wetlands in Ohio, we didn't have a ton, but here on this map you can see anything that's dark green was a wetland, a coastal wetland, and this is pre-European settlement. So you see a lot of that dark green focused in the western basin of Lake Erie, and that used to be, or still is, it used to be the Great Black Swamp. It's still called that in that region. However, a lot of those wetlands do not exist any longer. So I'm going to show you another map that did the same wetland survey circa the year 2000. And you can see we have a lot less of our coastal wetlands. In fact, in Ohio, we have lost 90% of our coastal wetlands. They're not really lost. We know where they went, right? So we had to repurpose the land as people moved in and needed to have farmland for agriculture, have development land so that we can live and eat and work in these areas. However, some of those functions that wetlands do for us have been impacted and impact our Lake Erie now that we don't have as many wetlands there. So remember we said wetlands filter the water for us. At the bottom you can see this was the 2011 harmful algal bloom. That was a really big one. And we get those algal blooms when we have excess runoff from the land. And a lot of our land, especially in the Western Basin, has agriculture, humans, we live there, we put fertilizers on our lawns and in our gardens as well, not just in agriculture. In freshwater, phosphorus is the limiting factor, so the more phosphorus we put into the system, the more likely we're going to get an algal bloom. Nitrogen is also one of the fertilizers that is used quite often, and we've recently found out that the amount of nitrates can impact the toxicity level of our algal blooms. So phosphorus tends to dictate how big the bloom will be. Nitrates will dictate maybe how toxic they are. So our wetlands, as that water runs through the wetlands, it can filter some of those things out before they get to Lake Erie. Now pair that with knowing that we've lost 90% of our wetlands, and we start to be able to put together the puzzle as to why we have some of the algal bloom problems we have specifically in the Western Basin. This picture you've already seen is Old Woman Creek when our mouth of Old Woman Creek is open to the lake, but this is not how it looks all the time. Sometimes you will see the barrier beach goes all the way across the mouth, and we do not have a mixing of our waters. This picture was taken just 2 weeks ago, and you can see that the sand goes all the way across, and right now all of our water in the wetland is just hanging out. And that's really important. That time that the water spends in the wetland gives it more time to do that filtering. So the green stuff in the water are water lilies and American lotus, which are starting to come up. All of those plants in the water are just as willing to uptake phosphorus and nitrogen as our plants on the land. So again, the more time the water can spend in the wetland before it heads into the lake, the more time our plants can do that filtering. I'm going to show you an animation of how this system works. So when we get precipitation on the land, whether it's rain or snowfall, when it's in liquid form, it flows downhill. Thank you, gravity. And around here, our low spot is Old Woman Creek. When that barrier beach is closed at the top, that water can spread out and slow down and hang out. Eventually, if we get enough precipitation, the water pressure will build up behind the beach and it'll actually start seeping through underneath. It undercuts and then opens to the lake, and then we get that water exchange with the lake. But again, the more time that the water has to spend in the wetland, the more time that the sediments will settle and our plants can filter out those excess fertilizers. All right. On to flood control. I'm going to show this animation. It's quick one more time, but this time instead of focusing on the barrier beach, I want you to, focus on those kind of excess areas off to the sides, those little coves that can take up some of that extra water. As you see, they'll turn blue here as precipitation's running in. Remember, we said that Old Woman Creek can gain in size about 20% increase in water during a storm event. So all these coves and stuff will help us hold that extra water, and the plants and animals that are there are perfectly fine with those rising waters. All right, we are going to move on to pictures, and I have some props here as well. So we're going to go through some of the plants and the animals that live in Old Woman Creek, and hopefully these will show up. So American lotus, this is a plant that a lot of people come to Old Woman Creek to see. It is a water depth dependent, so the more water we have, the more it's kind of pushed into the shallower areas. Some years we have lotus everywhere, and right now they're kind of in the shallows. You can tell lotus apart from lily because the flowers are up off the surface of the surface level of the water, and they have a really pretty yellow flower with a nice sweet smell. They bloom late July, early August, so people love to come canoeing at that point, so they can see them all in bloom. And this plant is really cool because almost every part of it is edible, and many parts of it are usable for other things. So the flowers, the seeds, the roots are all edible. The leaves are actually what we call hydrophobic or waterproof, so they have a waterproof coating. You'll see the Asian lotus leaves used as hats, sometimes because they're waterproof and they provide excellent coverage to your head. So that's American lotus. This is arrowroot, and this is another edible plant. The Native Americans would use the tuber at the bottom to put in stews and soups as like a potato. It has a really pretty white flower. Cattail, our native cattail is broadleaf. This is the flower that we're all used to seeing that looks kind of like a corn dog. Again, a highly usable plant. Our muskrats use it a lot. It is also water depth dependent, and right now we don't have a lot of cattail because we have so much water in the estuary and the wetland. And our last pretty flowering plant here is our water lily. So you can see that the leaves and the flowers are on the surface of the water. The leaves of this one also kind of have that Pac-Man shape, that little pie piece cut out of it. That's a way you can tell the difference between the American lotus and the water lily. We're going to switch to animals now. So first up is reptiles. If anyone is triggered by snakes, I will warn you, there are two pictures of snakes. The first one is a snake. It is the water snake. It is an indigenous reptile here. They are not venomous. In this area, we don't have any venomous snakes left. These guys can be a little aggressive, but it's usually you have to start the fight with them before they'll bother you back. So if you don't bother them, they typically won't bother you. They know you're too big to eat. They just usually are trying to get away from you. But they really help with, you know, rodent control and smaller creatures, frogs and that part. A tried to pick an interesting turtle. This is the spiny soft-shelled turtle. You can see he's much more flattened than a lot of our turtles. He's got that pointy nose that he can dig around in the substrate, rocks, and sediment to find its food. Very unique looking. We do find them here at Old Woman Creek. Not a ton, but we do find them. This little guy is a Midland painted turtle, and I actually have my live Midland painted turtle that I can show you. Hopefully you guys will be able to see this. So this is Frank. Unfortunately, Frank was dropped off in our tank unbeknownst to us, and so I don't know where he came from, which means he will be here in our visitor center for his entire life. He's got a nice big tank and some fish to hang out with. He's being a little camera shy. I can tell that Frank is a male if he sticks his claws out. He's got real long claws at the end of his hands. There we go, which the males have, and they do a little display in the water where they try and tickle the female's chin, and that's one of the ways I can tell. You can see that the water turtles, they can't close their shell up all the way. So he's got those big claws. He's got a nice sized beak when he gets a little bigger. And those are his main defense mechanisms, as well as being able to swim away. All right, Frank, you're going back in the water. And I always do a little sanitizing after turtles. They can be very dirty. They can carry salmonella. So keep that in mind if you see turtles in the wild. We do get hatchlings around, and that's what the one in the picture is. Before that one, since he was born here out on the property, we knew he would make it to the water. I got to encounter a couple of these guys yesterday. This is the American snapping turtle, much bigger mouth, much bigger beak. They got into my fish sampling net yesterday. I had 2 in there that you have to be very careful to remove. These guys will hurt. They can do some damage with that mouth, but they are a native species, and they're around. So just, I would say, do not pick up the snapping turtles. All right, one more snake picture. And this is the eastern fox snake. This is our snake that is a wetland specific species. Very mild-mannered snake. You can see that its head is a little copper tinted, so sometimes they get confused with copperheads. And then as a defense mechanism, they will curl up and shake their tail, kind of like a rattlesnake would. Again, we don't have any venomous snakes in this area, but they mimic the behavior of venomous snakes to try to avoid predation. But very mild-mannered snake and super pretty and nice for the wetlands. All right, we're done with snakes if you're not a snake person. On to our furry and fuzzy folks. So mammals, this is the muskrat. Emily took this picture on one of her monitoring boat trips. I have a muskrat skull and a muskrat pelt. So you can kind of get an idea of the size of this animal. Muskrats, all of the mammals we're going to talk about are fur bearers, so they do have hunting season. Muskrats, a lot of them, the water mammals, are really hunted for their pelts because they're nice and warm. They keep them insulated during the winter and in cold water. These guys, sometimes people confuse them with beavers, but they're much smaller and they have that skinny rat tail. So when you see them swimming, they use their little rat tail as kind of like an udder, or a rudder. All right, next up is coyote. So typically not considered a wetland species, but this picture was taken on our beaver lodge. You can see that it's one of our trail camera grabs. So we have a couple trail cameras that are motion censored out on our beaver lodge as part of the monitoring program. And basically found out that everybody likes to visit the beaver lodge. So this coyote was sniffing around and seeing what was happening. We also get deer out there. Most ungulates, deer, horses, cows, they can swim. Seems to defy physics, but they can do it. So, and the deer have such good hearing, they always seem to hear the camera click. And so we get a lot of like full deer selfies in our trail cameras.
Hey, Jen, is there somewhere that folks can go to view those trail cameras at?
We don't have them up.
Okay.
No, they're not. They're just photographs. They're mostly not videos. So.
Gotcha.
Okay. This is a mink. So it is a mammal, but as opposed to our muskrats, this guy is a carnivore. So if you can see those teeth, he's also in the weasel family. And this is his pelt. So you can see for size, not real big, but that weasel blood helps them be pretty ferocious. They always have that little white patch on their chin. That's how you can identify mink. And they are pretty good at hunting small things. All right, so in this picture, if you look at the bottom right corner of each picture, you'll see an otter, a river otter. And those guys like to hang out also by the beaver lodge. And again, they are our carnivores. Here is his skull, much bigger than the mink skull. And his pelt, otter fur, was very highly sought after for a while for furs. It's a double layer, very soft, waterproof, very cute, but again, very effective predators. All right, and that tail should be recognizable. That is a beaver bottom. So we do, our beavers moved in, I think in 2016, 2017. We had a pair. They started building their lodge. What they'll do is they'll rent a place, so they'll get some temporary housing before they decide where they really want to set up shop. For this one, it was just, a couple hundred feet downriver, upriver, and then they built their lodge. And we've been able to catch them on our trail cameras. Beavers are very industrious. So Dad was out about every night from midnight to 6. Here's the beaver skull. Working on the lodge, the males work on the lodges, and he'll bring his kits out and show them how to tend to the lodge and build it. And about like
one more time, Jen. Sorry.
Say it. Say what one more time?
Can you hold the skull up one more time?
Yeah. So this is a real skull. It's gotten a little bit of damage. You can see those big teeth up front that they use to cut through the wood. They got big eye sockets. They're nocturnal. So yeah, pretty good size. And then definitely compared to the muskrat, much bigger. And then the beaver pelt, again, much bigger. Also highly sought after for fur, kind of like that otter double layer. It's got the longer fur and then a down underneath to help keep them warm. They kind of trap air in between those two, and their body heat warms that air, and it acts like another layer of insulation for them. They're active all year. They do not really hibernate. When we do our winter pictures from this, you see a little trail around his lodge where he works, and he follows the same path every night to and from work. All right, so those are our fur bearers. Next, we have fish. Again, I just tried to pick some of the more interesting species. We have all sorts of fish. We have several species of catfish. These are our bottom feeders. They use those whiskers to find food. We tend to have pretty turbid water or cloudy water, so their whiskers really help them find what they need to eat in the waters of Oldham Creek. This is a bowfin. Fish, like birds, the males will be more brightly colored, and specifically in the spring for spawning season. So this male bowfin, the fins and some of the scales on the bottom turn that super pretty teal color. This is a more ancient fish, so they have fleshy fins, but more armored scales, and they have a bone, a hardened scale on their bottom to really protect them. They're a lie in wait predator, so they'll wait until something swims by their face, and then they'll react really quickly and snatch it up. So this is a really pretty fish we see a lot in the springtime. We have a lot of sunfish. This is a pumpkin seed. It's a really big one, but you can tell there's orange just at the tip of that, kind of where we would see on a bluegill. That's all blue. There's a little bit of orange on that, and it's got that kind of pumpkin seedy coloring. We do get bluegill. We do get green sunfish. We get crappie. We pretty much get most of the sunfish family. That's another nice big colorful spring male sunfish. We get gar. So the sunfish we tend to catch in nets that we put out overnight for sampling, and then we'll check them the following morning. We do use electrofishing for our deeper water or open water fish, like the gar, that wouldn't typically swim into a net so close to shore. This is obviously a predatory fish. In that long beak, he's got little teeth that he uses to help catch his prey. That is a northern pike. The legend goes that Old Woman Creek used to be able to stock almost all of Ohio with northern pike out of Old Woman Creek. But as the landscape changed, as the fish species and the habitats changed, our water has become more turbid or more cloudy. Pike are sight hunters. They need clear water. So we hadn't found one in about 20 years, and this picture was taken last year. The fish are all let go back into the water. We just like to do spring, summer, and fall sampling to see who's here just to come in and spawn in the spring. So who's going to use it as a nursery? Who's going to use the water? Who can we find here all year? And then how do their populations vary through the different seasons? All right. Birds. So the western basin of Ohio is known for its birding. We get a lot of migratory birds because we have two flyways that go over the kind of western edge. I'll talk more about bird migration and the flyways next week. But the result is we can find a lot of birds here. People come to do birding. If you think McGee Marsh and Ottawa get too crowded, you can always swing by Old Woman Creek and see not all, but a lot of the same birds. Every spring, we seem to get a pair of trumpeter swans. These ones were being pretty chill. They let us get fairly close to take this picture. They only stay typically for a couple weeks and then they move further north. But we always enjoy seeing these very large swans because we don't get to see them most of the year. The belted kingfisher is one that we kind of think of as our mascot. We have quite a few of these guys. They're always letting you know when they're flying around, when you're bothering them. They have a very fast staccato call. Obviously a fishing bird, you can see by the shape of that beak. And they do sweeps down into the water to grab their fish. Fun bird. They nest in the sides of our small cliffs, kind of sandy basis, and they make little holes and use their nest there. This is my favorite duck. So this is the male wood duck. Again, the males are brightly colored for a lot of birds to attract the females. We have a lot of wood ducks here, and they're fun to see because they're so pretty. The red-winged blackbird, we all know this guy. He can be quite territorial. He'll flash his red shoulders at you. Again, if you're too close, they are not afraid to dive bomb you to let you know that this is their territory, or anybody else who might be in the area. You often hear them calling. They like to sit up on reeds or cattail, or like this one on a stick near their territory, and just kind of keep watch and make sure no intruders come in. Another bird that we get a lot here, the great blue heron. And we just actually discovered a heronry. So these are colonial nesters. So this year they started a heronry where we had about 40 nests. Most of the babies have fledged. Last week, I think we saw 1 or 2 still in their nests. So we had about at least 40 new herons out into the world. A wading bird, so tall legs, long neck that they then wait very still and swoop their neck down into the water to grab a fish or a frog or sometimes even small snakes that swim by to get them. They're about 4 feet. They can be about 4 feet tall, so they're a pretty good sized bird. This is one of my favorite pictures that a volunteer took for us this year. This is the great egret in its breeding colors. You can see the green, almost like green eyeshadow by its eye, and then those long kind of almost stringy feathers off its back. That's its breeding plumage. So this is a male, again, trying to look as pretty as he can to attract some females. Very similar bird in the same family as the heron. They tend to be waders, and they'll wait very stilly till something swims by, and then they'll grab it with their beak. And the bald eagle. So for years, people have come up to Old Woman Creek to see bald eagles. We tend to have quite a big population. Thank goodness, conservation efforts have proven successful, and their population is growing. I would say we typically have 10 to 40 bald eagles hanging around. I always tell people, if you really want to see a bald eagle, come see us in January. There's typically upwards of 30 to 40 hunkered down in our trees. So when hunting's not good out on the lake, they'll hunker down in the estuary in the wetland area. When it's a beautiful day and they can find food anywhere, they'll spread out further. We do have an active eagle's nest, and Emily will probably tell you more about that in a couple weeks with our monitoring program. But we've had successful fledglings the last 3 years. And the bald eagles, the males look pretty much the same as the females. So I don't know if this was a male or female, but another great picture from one of our volunteers. So those are some of the plants and animals. And the fourth benefit that we get from wetlands is the opportunity to do some nice recreation through the wetlands. So we mentioned bird watching. This is from the boardwalk at McGee Marsh during the biggest weekend of American birding. And you can get people from all over the world coming to look for birds that are migrating through. We get, birds all the way from South America, Central America, the Caribbean, as they fly either to this area or more north for their breeding habitat. Birding alone brings about $40 million, or bird watching alone brings about $40 million into the Ohio economy every year. This year was a little dampened because of COVID, but you can still get out and see birds. You might just not want to stand quite as close to each other as these people are. There are beaches. This was a teacher workshop that we had, so we try to bring teachers up to Old Woman Creek to learn about this area, but we do have a public beach because ours is a state nature preserve. You can only walk and stroll and have fun. There's no swimming off of our beach. There's no boating or fishing off of our beach either. But it's always a nice kind of quiet place. There's lots of shade, as you can see, and you can just sit out and look at the lake and enjoy. Wetlands also provide opportunities to be on the water. So typically we would do group canoe trips. This year has looked a little different for us, just like everybody else. But we have guided canoe tours, or it provides the opportunity to get out on the water and enjoy some quiet time by yourself or just with a loved one. So for us, being a state nature preserve, you can paddle back in your own boat. You just need to follow the proper channels and get access permit, which is available on our website. We also have trails, so just if you don't want to get on or in the water, walking near the water. I was out at this overlook this morning. It's just a lovely kind of quiet place to look and enjoy nature. You can do all of your bird watching or observations. You can just enjoy the fresh air. You can see we have a scope for viewing things that are a little further away. And in the year that this picture was taken, you can tell that the water was a little lower because I can see all those lotus encroaching on our main channel. Right now, there's a lot less lotus and a lot more open water.
Jen, are you there? Okay, it looks like we may have just lost Jen. Let's see, Janice or Emily, do either of you have anything that you might be able to talk about until Jen gets back? You're on mute, Emily.
Yes, so I do have Jen's presentation, but I will wait because it looks like she's jumping back on.
Oh, okay.
So we'll wait
All
a minute.
right,
Okay, Jen, we can see you again.
Okay, I'm gonna send.
Oh, you're muted though.
All right.
Okay, we're back.
Technology is fun. All right, I just have a couple more slides, so it shouldn't be. I'm going to start a little bit further down so we don't have to see them all again. All right. Sorry about that. All right, so recreation, we had our bird, we got our walking on the beach, canoeing, kayaking, observing. I think I was saying that we do offer night hikes. To experience the estuary and the reserve at a little different time at night. You get to hear different birds, you get to see different animals. So when we get to a normal year again, hopefully we'll bring back these night hikes.
Hey, Jen.
So I always like to give people an idea of what are some things that you can do if you like wetlands and you want to help wetlands. So one is just keep it clean. Obviously, don't litter. We offer or we ask for volunteers to do beach cleanups, usually about once or twice a year. I will say every time, unfortunately, I do a walk, I usually see a piece of litter. Sometimes, it's accidental, they drop out of your pocket, and sometimes people are just a little less careful than we wish they would be. Other things we do, we try to have invasive species under control. Our last talk on July 30th will be specifically about invasive species, and you'll probably learn a little bit more about the one that's on the front of my canoe or kayak here. This is European frogbit, which is one of our active removal projects. So planting native species in your own home properties will prevent the spread of invasive species. And then you can always check to see if there are opportunities to volunteer to help remove invasive species, like this one with European frogbit. If you aren't allowed to fish at our wetland because we're a state nature preserve, but if you do fish near wetlands, you can make sure that you properly dispose of your fishing line, There are some places that offer these recycling bins that it gets collected and then recycled so that it doesn't end up as trash, which can actually not just be unsightly, but a lot of fishing line gets entangled with wildlife and they can be severely injured and or killed from fishing line and hooks and things like that. So as long as you take care of it responsibly, that definitely helps wetlands. And just protecting the wetlands that we have left. So remember I said Ohio's lost about 90% of its coastal wetlands. So the 10% that we have left, we have to ensure that they are protected, preserved for the future, for the benefits of our water quality. And then you can also, there are also projects that are doing restoration work. So maybe areas that used to be wetlands are being restored. Ohio has a new big initiative called H2 Ohio that is doing just that. And you can check that out. Maybe someone can put the website in the chat box. And even in the Western Basin, Toledo Metro Parks took an old farmstead that was no longer being used and made it back into a wetland. It's called Howard's Marsh, and it's really neat to check out. They have like, I don't know, 6 or 8 miles of water trails and hiking trails and all sorts of stuff. So protecting what we have left and maybe restoring some natural wetlands. And then just enjoy the scenery. If you have the chance to get out and enjoy a wetland, please do so. That is the conclusion of my talk. So if anyone has any questions, type them in the chat box and I would be happy to answer them.
We do have one question I was hoping you could answer, Jen. So Drew wrote in and asked, is Old Woman Creek having a teacher training this year?
Unfortunately, we are not. We did have one scheduled for the end of June, but our teacher trainings tend to be residential, which means they're sharing small dormitories, dormitory rooms. So it was just too much close contact for this year. We will hopefully be having 2 next year. Typically in June and July, we try to get them in. So yeah, keep posted. If you you can email me if you are interested, and I can get you on our email list. Can Janice or Emily put my email in the chat in the Q&A box? So if anybody wants to, that's my email. It's also on our website. So good question. I was bummed about that one.
Okay, and so Travis wrote in a little while ago and asked what part of the state Ohio, or excuse me, Old Woman Creek is. And so I mentioned Huron, Ohio, but I just want to make that, put that out there in case anyone else wants to come visit. I don't know if you have anything to elaborate there.
We're about halfway between Vermilion and Sandusky. We are the southernmost point on Lake Erie. So we have trails that are open sun up to sundown on the south side of the road, which is where the visitor center is, and all the trails are there. They're marked with maps. And then on the north side of the road, just on the other side of the creek, is where that beach access is. And so both are open sun up to sundown, free to everybody, the general public. So yeah, if you can make it out, that's great. Come visit us. And
do you guys do the Ohio Certified Volunteer Naturalist Program? Do you know when you have the next one?
It should be next year. So I try to do it every other year. And we did one in 2019. So 2021 should be the year. Again, email me if you're interested. We do the Erie County one, although we welcome anybody. So if you want to get your Ohio Certified Volunteer Naturalist certification on the lake and near the lake. We do a lot of fun activities. I usually try and get the participants out fish sampling with me so they can see some of the things they're learning about. Usually Emily comes in and talks about reptiles because that's one of her specialties, and she talks about the monitoring program, which is a component of how you can earn your citizen science or your certified volunteer naturalist hours every year, is participating in citizen science monitoring programs. So we have quite a few that participate that way too.
And does the blockage between the lake and the wetland occur naturally, or is it controlled by the park? And that question comes from Dave. So thanks, Dave, for your question.
That's a great question. The State Nature Preserve, we let it go natural. We ourselves do not do any opening or closing of it. So it will naturally open and close. When we get prevailing winds from the north or the northeast, that's when we tend to get sand deposition. So if we have a lot of easterly or northeasterly winds, which we've had a lot lately, we get sand deposition. And
looks like we've lost Jen. I'll just continue on where she was talking. Yes, so right now we have a lot of sand deposition, but as the winds change, it'll open back up again. And so that is how that works. Hopefully she will come back in, or if I can answer any additional questions that anyone might have. And Alyssa, you are on mute.
Oh, sorry about that. I was going to say that we're getting close to the time to wrap it up anyways, but I did have one other question. So Jen mentioned H2 Ohio, where people could go for more information on those sites. And I know, Janice, you shared a link in there, but what are resources that people can go to learn, maybe families? Is there any additional information out there to learn about wetlands?
And Jen may be able to speak up about this as well. We did post some information on our website in the chat feed, and then also on our friend's Facebook account often has updates and information that is updated regularly. Jen, do you have any other suggestions about wetland sites in general?
There is a Wetland Society in Ohio. The name is escaping me.
Ohio Wetland Society.
Right, yeah, okay.
Ohio Wetlands
Association, thank you. I wasn't ringing correctly in my head when I was hearing it. So yeah, and they have a great website. They do a conference typically once a year that they get great speakers. So if you're really into this stuff, you want to learn more about amphibians or reptiles or wetland plants, they have a great conference for that as well.
Okay, and Russ C just wrote in, and so I want to ask this question before we go, but he asks what types of research efforts are being conducted. So I don't know if Jen or Janice, who wants to take that one?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and answer that question. We have a whole variety of research. Later on, we'll hear a little bit about citizen science. That's what Emily is involved in. That's one of our upcoming webinars, so I'll hold off on talking about that until then. But we also have our mission here at the Reserve is both education and research. And so the research is conducted through our long-term monitoring program that's part of the nationwide reserve program. And then we also have collaborative relationships with many of the academic institutions from around Ohio. Some of the ongoing work right now is looking at how the wetlands filter out nutrients, so that Jen mentioned earlier, the reduction in nitrogen and phosphorus. That's a lot of what we're trying to understand, especially as a part of H2 Ohio. I'm personally involved in developing or assisting to develop a long-term monitoring program for those wetland restoration sites. We are working with LEARN, which is the Lake Erie Area River Research Network, which is a research consortium of universities across the state to develop a program to see how effective we are at our restoration of these wetlands for the purpose of reducing nutrients. Those are the big highlights for right now. You're on mute again, Alyssa.
Gosh, I do that all the time. Thank you, Janice and Jen and Emily for everything today. I just want to thank everybody who joined us for watching. And next week, like we mentioned, we'll be talking about bird migration. The following week, citizen science, and then the last week, aquatic invasive species, plants invasive species. So we hope to have you back then. Those will all be Thursdays at noon. And just as a reminder, on Wednesdays at 10 a.m., we do have our new series, Ohio Bird's Eye, and that's with our park naturalists. We talked about how to be a birder this week. That was recorded and will be posted on YouTube shortly, as will this webinar. So if you want to go back and watch it, please do at OhioDNR on YouTube, and you'll find all of our videos there. And then down the line for the Ohio Bird's Eye webinar, we're going to be talking about birds of prey next week, hummingbirds following that, and then last but not least, cavity nesters. So yeah, we'll see you next time on this episode of Wetland Wonders. Thanks.
Thank you.